And we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Wheelie Podcast. I'm your host, Micah Toll, and I'm joined by Lectrek's Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Awesome. And we have a pile of interesting news stories this week. In the e-bike space, we've got a number of cargo-related e-bikes that have been released, as well as a cool ride-by-wire system. There's a wild new seated electric scooter that'll do 50 miles an hour. We just learned that Arcimoto has gotten a stay of execution, so their funky three-wheeled electric vehicles are going to be around for a while. There's a new electric UTV, and we're going to talk about a fun electric boat that I ordered from Alibaba that actually showed up. But before we get there, we're going to start off in the e-bike space. Where are we starting today, Seth?
All right. The game-changing Lectric XPedition launched as an affordable electric cargo bike.
This is such a huge deal. And I know each e-bike launch we're like, whoa, cool new e-bike. But this one, this is like the real game changer here. And I think the biggest thing here is just the sort of quality for price. Now, Lectric is not known for making high-end e-bikes, and you can't say that this bike is high-end either. But at $13.99, you get a lot in this cargo bike. Basically, this will do most of what a Radwagon, a Blixpack, all these other sort of like $2,000 to $2,500 cargo bikes will do, but in a much more affordable package. It's also got better parts than a lot of these other bikes. It's got hydraulic disc brakes, which a lot of cargo e-bikes still don't have. It's got a 2 battery option. That second battery will cost you an extra $300, but even that is kind of a steal for a second 650 or so watt hour battery. It gets up to 28 miles an hour, so it's a class 3 e-bike, and it's got really nice pedal assist because they actually did something a little different here. It does have a cadence sensor, which is not a fancy pedal assist sensor. It just bases its pedal assist on your speed. But what they did differently was the programming for that pedal assist sensor. So basically, instead of having speed steps where normally, you'd be in like pedal assist level 1, it would take you maybe 10 miles an hour, and level 2 would take you to 15. Instead, they did the programming based on wattage. So it actually limits your wattage to, like maybe 200 watts on level 1, 300 watts in level 2, that sort of thing, all the way up to 750 watts of continuous power. And so that way, when you're pedaling on a higher pedal assist level, it doesn't just rocket you up to a really fast speed. You can still pedal at a slower speed, and it just gives you more power. So it's almost like a torque sensor in that sense. It's kind of a pseudo torque sensor feeling, at least in terms of the speed. What it doesn't do is it doesn't give you immediate pedal assist right on startup because it's still a cadence-based sensor, and so it has the disadvantage that you got to get like a pedal rotation or so until it can read how fast you're pedaling. But for $13.99 or $16.99 for the dual battery version, you really get a lot here for the price, which in my opinion, is just going to open the door to so many more people that wanted a cargo bike. They wanted to be able to do things that they maybe normally took the car out of the garage for, go grocery shopping, take the kids down the block to the park, that sort of thing. But they weren't prepared to lay out 2,000, 2,500 bucks for a cargo bike. And especially if you compare it to those really nice cargo bikes, like we often talk about the Turn GSD as one of the just, like creme de la creme of cargo bikes. Again, nowhere near the quality here with Lectric XPedition, but for maybe a quarter of the price of those really nice bikes, you get perhaps 75 to 80% of the functionality. So I think this is just a huge deal. What do you think about the bike, Seth?
I love the look of it. I do notice that the front cable coming out kind of wide to the left there. And I just wonder, this is we of course love electric bikes. They're always like undercutting kind of the mainstream prices, but I guess it's like the fit and finish. Like, is this closer to a Turn GSD, or is this closer to like a bike you would find on Amazon for like $600?
Right. Yeah. I would say it's somewhere nicely in the middle.
Hmm.
It's nowhere near the quality of a GSD. Turn, they work with I think German labs to just like crazy torture test their bikes. And I think you could like, park a truck on the back half of a Turn GSD kind of
Right.
thing. And so
Yeah.
even though the Lectric XPedition here has a really high weight rating, I think they say up to like 450 pounds. I doubt that they're going to the lengths that some of the higher end cargo bike companies are going to test and really engineer for those super high weights. So it's not going to be the same quality, and I don't want anyone to think that like you're getting a Turn GSD for cheap here. But it's definitely a step above those Amazon bikes, and you could tell it's much better thought out. It doesn't feel like a collection of parts. It feels like they actually designed a very nice bike here, for super heavy cargo use, not necessarily heavy in weight, but just like, if every day you're, doing delivery on a bike, or every day you're taking your kids to school, I still would probably recommend, like, if not a Turn GSD, then maybe one of their more affordable bikes like the HSD or Quick Haul. But for like casual cargo riders that want to go grocery shopping a few times a week, or have the option of taking their kids sometimes, I think this is really a nice step up from a cheap bike that still gives you the functionality of a nicer bike.
Yeah, and you said it's class 3. It's got a throttle. It's got, what are those, 3-inch wheels?
Yeah, they're 3-inch tires, so again, it's that sort of nice compromise. Not super fat, but a little more moto feeling.
Yeah. And does this also like stack on its side or on its back like a GSD?
No,
No.
yeah, I
It
wish it
it,
did. That
it
would be
kind of looks
cool.
like it could. Like the back kind of look. I guess it's kind of on an angle. They didn't want
Yeah,
to copy that much, I guess.
yeah. I wonder if that's patented, because I've never seen anyone do that besides Turn. So I wonder
Yeah,
if
it
they have a
seems
patent
really
on
useful.
that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, looks like a fantastic bike. When are these available?
They're actually already available for pre-order, and I believe they start shipping in about 2 weeks.
Interesting. And you where was this that you reviewed it?
So most of this was filmed in Florida, but I
Okay.
also got a chance to test it out in Phoenix, where I did some crazy hill climbing.
Yeah, I
And
saw that at the beginning of the video.
exactly, yeah. So that was a great chance to just feel how ridiculously torquey this thing is, which is exactly what you want on a cargo bike.
Nice. All right. I want to check that one out too. Hopefully those are around for everyone soon. All right. And kind of the other end of the spectrum, Trek unveils 2 kid-carrying electric cargo bikes, and they sure look familiar.
Yeah, so this actually came out a few days before the expedition, and my implication in the they look familiar was that the long tail bike here that we're looking at was sort of like a longer edition of the GSD in terms of being a high quality mid drive cargo bike, and then the second model they unveiled, which is a front loader. I think they're often called back Fiats or Bach Fiats. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a Dutch word that the Dutch are real big on these front loader cargo bikes. And so it's two, very different styles of two-wheeled cargo bikes, but both very popular models that we're starting to see a lot more of. And so this was Trek's first cargo e-bike collection. They've done cargo pedal bikes, acoustic bikes before, but this is their first stab at the electric ones, and they look great. I mean, they're expensive, right? So the long tail one we're looking at here, this is the Fetch Plus Two. I think that's somewhere north of $6,000, if I'm not mistaken. And then the front loader is like 8.5 or $9,000. So we're talking about really expensive bikes here. But obviously, they're coming from a company that doesn't mess around when it comes to quality. Trek is not going to, shortchange people or save a couple bucks here or there. They build very nice quality bikes. So again, these are like for the type of people who use their bike every day as a replacement for a car. They need to make sure that it's the kind of quality that you can depend on it day in and day out, 30 miles a day kind of thing.
Yeah, and they both look like bikes we've seen before. As you mentioned in the title, um, the long tail one obviously kind of reminds us a little bit of the Turn GSD as we were talking about with Electrek. It's interesting how many different bike companies are going with this form factor. Like they've Turn really kind of hit it out of the park with that one.
Yeah, and the long tail, I think that it's really attractive for a lot of companies because it's just a lot more affordable to produce. If you compare it to
Right.
that front loader, I mean, the front loader, it's got long steering linkage. You either need cables or like a steering tube to transfer the steering torque up to the front. They have very different load requirements, and so there's a lot more that goes into producing those. Whereas the long tails, we see a lot more of those because it just seems like a lot easier to produce with the same components, slightly different welding jigs, but a lot more familiar to companies.
Yeah, and obviously the these companies think that the market is, ripe for more uh, different varieties. So you're thinking high end, obviously. If you're thinking Trek, what would make you pick this? Talking about the Fetch Plus 2 here over a Turn GSD.
So this is a little bit bigger than a GSD. The thing that I personally like about the Turn GSD is that it's a heavy hauling bike, but it's fairly compact. So, if you have it in an apartment, which I live in a city, so I'm often thinking of, someone who doesn't have a garage, then it's a lot easier to fit into an elevator. It's a lot easier to park in your living room if you needed to. Like you mentioned, they can actually stand on their tail straight up and down like a coat rack kind of thing in the corner of the room. So in that sense, as an urban rider, I definitely see advantages of bikes like Turn's smaller cargo bikes. But for someone who has the garage space and wants an even longer bike, I think you could probably get like three kids on the back of the Fetch Plus 2. I mean, they show two there with that nice corral thing to hold the kids in. But if you just put like bench pads on there,
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't be surprised getting, a family of four up there.
Yeah, wow. That is pretty cool. And of course, we know Trek has a extensive network of bike shops that sell and service them. So I know Turn also has quite a few bike shops as well. But perhaps you're close to a truck shop and you want to get those wheels tightened and everything done just right. So that maybe makes a little bit more sense. Um, has Trek? Have we talked to Trek about getting uh, loaners to test?
We haven't yet. These are brand new. I'm not sure that they're going to be available until later in the spring or early summer, but
Okay.
we definitely need to get these into our testing lineup for sure.
Yeah, definitely want to check those out. All right, moving on. We're going to talk about the radical new ride-by-wire electric bike drivetrain with no chains or belts, and it begins production.
This one we actually covered when it was first announced about a year and a half ago. It's called the Free Drive from a German designer called Schaeffler. And it's a really interesting system because it's essentially a series hybrid, but for a bicycle. So most electric bicycles would be considered what you call a parallel hybrid. So you can either pedal it or you can use the electric drivetrain, or you can do both, but they're independent. In this case, creating a sort of ride by wire system is a series hybrid. So there's no mechanical connection between the pedals and the wheels. Instead, there's actually a motor at the pedals, which you're turning. So it creates a generator, and you're actually generating electricity. That gets transferred to a motor that powers the wheels through wires. So instead of a mechanical connection, it's all done electronically, or I guess electrically in that sense, because you're transferring electrical power. And it sounds kind of odd because it's like, all right, we've had pedal drivetrains for, over a century and they work pretty well. So why would you want to replace that? Well, the interesting thing about this setup is that it's really great for cargo bikes where having to plan around a pedal drivetrain really limits the design of cargo bikes, especially cargo trikes with big cargo boxes on the back, because you either have to create a tunnel for a really long chain drive to get back there, where you have to have the cargo box up higher so that it's above the chain. And if you have a drive-by-wire system, you don't have to plan for any physical drivetrain. You can have a really low cargo box in the back, or you can completely delete the tunnel, and it just gives you so much more freedom to design the physical proportions of the bike when all you have to do is route, electrical wires somewhere around the bike. So it's certainly going to open up interesting doors to designers. And now, a year and a half after we originally broke the news, it's exciting to see that it is finally entering production, and they've announced that they've already got cargo bikes or cargo bike companies that have signed up to be the first to use this system. So we're actually going to see this entering the market on some European cargo bikes, hopefully in the near future. And I'll be fascinated to see what this design allows them to do with the engineering of the bike now that they have fewer constraints on the sort of hardware design of creating these cargo bikes.
Yeah, we were talking about way back then when we saw this initially, like, hey, this is going to open up a lot of doors for bike designers. not just in cargo bikes, but also, coming maybe recumbent bikes instead of running a chain, from the tip of your toes all the way back to the drive wheels. Maybe you just have one of these at the front of a recumbent bike, and the wires transfer the electricity back. The obvious downside is that the turning of the power of your legs into electricity and then back into power to the motor or back into the battery, there's a lot of inefficiency there. So what are we thinking? You're losing about 20 to 30% of the power that you're throwing in there.
Yeah, probably. It's rare to see e-bike motors above 90% efficient. So losing, 10% at the generator and then another 10% at the motor end, I think would be probably the best they could do. I mean, this is a German design, so I imagine they're going to be using, the highest efficiency that they can do. But still, it's not going to win on any efficiency competition.
Yeah, but I mean, when you take into consideration that you're always going to be at your optimal or close to your optimal pedal speed and torque, and that you can create all these, maybe more aerodynamic or more efficient drive systems, I think this is really kind of a big deal. And I hope that, you know, these companies keep going with it. I mean, we talked about when we were riding around the cargo bike. I think there was like a huge thing in the back, like an SUV type of carrier, and like our pedaling wasn't contributing a lot of the electricity to moving that thing around. It was more like the pedaling was a kind of like a throttle, so to speak. So you have your arms for steering and turn signals and stuff, and your legs moving was kind of just like telling the vehicle to go forward and not really adding much to the whole power equation.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so
that's sorry, go on.
no, I just trying to set the expectation there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, it's an interesting point because it also speaks to why, even if you're losing some efficiency here, the fact that it's still an e-bike means that you kind of make up for the loss of efficiency. For example, if maybe it's 20% less efficient and you've got a 1,000 watt hour battery, if you just put a 1,200 watt hour battery in there, you've kind of made up for those efficiency losses simply by putting a few more battery cells there.
Right. And theoretically down the road, we've seen some bikes that you can actually stay in one place and pedal and actually charge up the battery a little bit. Those are the kind of design ideas you could do with this, where maybe you're just trying to get some exercise and hanging out at home. You could charge up your battery that way. A lot of different interesting options with something like this.
Yeah, for sure. It also finally gives us the chance to say that you have an e-bike that charges when you pedal it, because so many people always ask when they see an e-bike, "Oh, does it charge when you pedal it?" So here's one that finally does. And it looks like we lost Seth from the feed here, unfortunately. Oh, I think he's back. There he is. Now he's back.
Yeah, I hit the wrong back button. That's funny.
It's
All
great
right,
to
let
have
me.
you back on the show, Seth.
Yeah, it's great to be back. All right, let me go to the next story here. All right, new RoadRunner Pro electric scooter hits 50 plus mile per hour speeds while sitting down.
This one is kind of going to blow your mind, either in a good way or a bad way, depending how you feel about small, fast electric scooters. It comes from a company called Voro Motors. I think they're LA based, if I'm not mistaken. And about a year and a half ago, they came out with the first Roadrunner. It was already a little bit extra. It's a very small seated scooter, 14-inch wheels to sort of put the scale there for you. I described it as kind of like a battery with wheels bolted to it because it had, I think, like a 1,500 watt hour battery, and it got about 36, 37 miles an hour. This is the new version. It's the Roadrunner Pro, and they've drastically increased the power. So before it had a 500-watt motor in the rear and a 350-watt motor in the front. Now it's got 2,000-watt motors in both the front and the rear. So you're looking at 4,000 watts of combined power, an even bigger battery than the already massive battery that was on there, and speeds of up to 50 miles an hour, which is just kind of nuts for such a small vehicle. Now, it is full suspension, which is good because The former model only had front suspension, and I think if you hit a pothole at 50, you would be like rocketed off the saddle if it didn't have rear suspension. So I think that's probably a wise upgrade here. There are a few other small upgrades, better braking, better lighting, a nicer suspension fork up front, new wheels that are actually sort of like automotive or moto style. So there's no inner tube in there. They're actually wheels that split in the middle, and they have like an automotive style bead. So I think that makes sense when you're doing motor vehicle type speeds to have a higher quality wheel and tire there. It also makes changing a flat tire a lot easier if you need to repair the tire or swap it out for new tires. And so it's really just sort of like pushing a lot closer to a motorcycle level piece of equipment as opposed to sort of a hobby scooter or something you'd like order off of AliExpress kind of thing. This is definitely a much more refined version. The underlying issue here, though, is sort of legality. And I think that really depends on A, where you live, and B, how you're going to use the scooter. You'll notice that a lot of the product photos here are kind of like off road or private property looking settings, because in many places, I don't think this is going to fit into either e bike laws or scooter laws. It's obviously above the 28 mph limit for e-bikes. There's not even pedals, so you can't even pretend it's an e-bike. And then when you get into motorcycle or moped laws, at 50 miles an hour, I don't think it's going to fit into some of the lower speed, like 30 mile an hour moped limits. So you're probably looking at something that would be considered a motorcycle in many areas. What that means is that you kind of take a risk here if you're going to be using it on road, that you might have an issue with the police. If you're using it off road, of course, it's up to you how you want to use it. Have some fun on the trails, private property, that kind of thing. But it's worth noting that you should probably look into your local laws and regulations to figure out how your state would treat a vehicle like this.
Yeah, it's a crazy bike. I mean, I think, like many of our readers, I'm very excited about things like this, but also I know that there's a lot of opportunity for misuse. Clearly riding something like this on a bike path, probably not your best bet. Um, some jurisdictions, maybe the police are a little bit more lenient on electric motorcycle bike type things. Um, but it looks like it could be roadworthy. I mean, it has lights, but I have to say, like the ability to go 50 miles per hour with what are those 14-inch wheels?
Yeah, exactly.
That seems dangerous. Like you hit a pothole and that's it. That's the end of you. Uh, so I kind of wondered. I think to myself when I see something like this, I'm like, well, maybe you should just make it 30 miles per hour top speed, but you know, gear it differently so that it goes 0 to 30 in like 2 seconds, which would also be dangerous. Ask Simon Cowell about that. But dangerous in a sort of safer way, like in a top speed, uh, less in a top speed sort of way, and more in an acceleration sort of way. Um, but at the same time, I'm super intrigued by this thing because, like, I definitely want to try, like, seeing what all this power in such a small package would go for, and then maybe this thing makes a lot of sense. Maybe like this is the future. Like, obviously not 50 miles per hour, but if you can keep up with cars on 30-mile-per-hour roads, both in acceleration and top speed, um, maybe this is a great product. And then, you think about what we just talked about, the ride by wire thing. It wouldn't be hard to, throw one of those on there and have a little electricity going back into the battery. So I don't know. I mean, I know this isn't realistic for most people, but it's such a interesting thing. And what's also interesting is like this is where we can go. Like, when we get the like hyper scorpions and we're like, wow, that's super powerful, 33 miles per hour. Then you're like, oh, we can go much higher than that. We can, add a front wheel with just as much power as the back wheel. We can add more battery, all these things. So really cool project. Probably not really good for practical use yet, but super interesting.
Yeah, I'm definitely
You know,
excited about this. It shows you where things can go.
yeah. All right, I'll try not to hit the wrong back button here. Super cool. All right, moving on. Also super cool. Arcimoto. They are reanimated, saving the fast three-wheeled electric vehicles from bankruptcy.
Just a month ago, we were talking about Arcimoto, but for some fairly sad news that it looked like they were on the edge of bankruptcy. They were doing a last minute funding round where they sold like $12 million, or were trying to sell $12 million worth of stock at a significantly reduced price of $3 a share, which I think it had been trading at over $6 at that point. So it tanked the stock, and we thought this is probably the end of Arcimoto. But amazingly, sometimes these Hail Mary passes land, and they got it. So they raised the 12 million they needed. They were able to start back up their factory, and now they say that next month they're going to have new Arcimotos rolling out of the factory. Not only new Arcimotos, but upgraded. So the steering is getting a significant upgrade, which is probably one of the major downsides of the vehicle. Is that at low speed, it really feels like you're driving a car without power steering, because that's kind of what you're doing in effect. And
Yeah,
so if you're below like 15 miles an hour or so really like in a parking lot, you have to put some serious muscle into those bars to turn those big wheels and just like sort of just drag the rubber across the road. And so I don't know if they're putting in actual power steering or what they're doing, but they say their new vehicles rolling out next month are going to have 40% lower effort in low speed steering. So I'll have to see how they achieve that, but it sounds like it's going to be a big improvement for drivers that maybe don't have the upper body strength at low speeds to turn like a few hundred pounds of steering assembly, which is exciting to see. Having tested them myself, that was one of the big takeaways, was that like at speed they work great, but when you're maneuvering in a parking lot, it really feels like you're like driving a tractor or something trying to roll around. So not only is it exciting to see that they're going to be sticking around because it's a just a really fun company and a really cool concept, but it's cool to see that they're actively improving the design. And I really hope that this is sort of a return to greatness for Arcimoto, because a few years ago it seemed like they were at the top of the world. They were talking about increasing production, being able to drop the price from 20,000 to 12,000 with mass production. And so if they can still make that happen, if this is enough money to get them back rolling and growing at the point they need, then I could see a market for these things at that lower price. 20,000 is tough. 12,000 starts to be like, yeah, people can see spending some money on a fun vehicle like that. I don't know. What do you think, Seth?
yeah. I had the same experience. I really loved riding around in these things. They seemed like super over engineered. Um, you know, trike motorcycles. But they have great stability. They're fun to drive. You're covered from the rain if you want to be. And some of the models, like it hits a lot of like it's fun. Like they're just like going from point A to point B is a lot more fun in one of these than it is in a car. However, these are not primary vehicles probably for a lot of people. Um, when you look at them, you're kind of like, what is that like? It's very long. It's got four seats. It's a big vehicle for mobility things. So I think a lot of people who you can't get so many butts and seats on this. Um, they kind of wonder like where does this fit in my life? So if Arcimoto can get enough people to actually get on these things and give them a try, and like if it makes sense, in their world as either a secondary vehicle or a primary vehicle, um, then I think they have a shot. It is my understanding is that they're making these now in Europe versus Oregon.
Oh, I didn't actually see that about Europe. I'll have to look that up. That's interesting.
Yeah, I saw something about being built there. I really hope that they can get off the ground and kind of get these to scale. I mean, as you said, a $12,000 fun vehicle versus a $20,000 one is a big difference. And it's one of those things where like a lot of the people that buy vehicles know somebody who has one. So if they can get these out into the world a little bit, and more you see them on the road, and you say, "Oh, what the heck is that thing?" or your brother-in-law got one and it's really fun and you want to get one. They have to hit that level before something like this kind of takes off. So hopefully they can get to that level.
Yeah, I'm Team Arcimoto. I want to see them succeed.
Same.
All right, and I think we have lost Seth again. Probably a back button issue here. So I'm sure he'll be joining us again in a few seconds. Yep, here he is.
That's
He's back.
that's that's not annoying, is it? All right, sorry guys. The back button is so enticing over there. All right, so let's get out of that. Move back to that page. And
The comedic rule of threes, you've got one more coming, I think.
all right, come on. All right. Tracker unveils new 60 mile per hour, 60 mile range electric UTV with dumping bed.
Ooh, 60 miles an hour. I don't know if
That'd be cool.
you get catapulted into the roof of this thing, I think. Yeah, so this is an electric UTV. Basically, it's like a sort of a John Deere Gator, or like a very lower power Polaris Ranger type of vehicle. This is not a go-kart. It's for people that do work around ranches, farms, that sort of thing. And the Tracker Aux EV is Tracker's newest model. They have a lot of gas-powered versions, but this is a pretty nice stab at an electric UTV. It's not terribly overpowered. It's about 11 kilowatts or 15 horsepower. So it's not going to replace something crazy like a Polaris Ranger Kinetic, but it's got some pretty significant hauling and towing capacity. I think the hauling was like 1,200 pounds, if I'm not mistaken, and the towing was, I think, a bit higher than that even. So this is an actual work vehicle. It's not a golf cart, even though it kind of looks like it. This thing is designed to really do some serious around the farm type of work. So, but the interesting thing is that it's actually priced pretty reasonably. A new golf cart these days costs around $10,000, and this one is 13,000. So it's not as expensive as some of these more high priced John Deere versions, that sort of thing. But it still has some pretty good utility, especially for people that have like a hobby farm or want to take it, hunting, outdoorsman, that sort of thing, where you don't have the funds that like a big farming operation would have to invest in something more serious, but you still need a vehicle that can do some hauling, do some towing, that sort of thing, a dumping bed. So, really useful, but you still want to get electric and you don't want to pay for those crazy, early adopter Polaris ones that cost like $25,000, $30,000. So I'm excited to see these new companies coming in that offer the electric drive. They can get you like a clean, silent electric UTV, but not at crazy prices. I think $13,000 is entirely reasonable, especially considering the price of like a even a Polaris Gem kind of thing. That, or I guess it's not Polaris anymore. A Wave Gem that costs $20,000. This is really exciting, and it just looks like fun too. I mean, wouldn't you just want to like ride around in this stuff?
Yeah, and I have to emphasize the price on this as you did. That's what's kind of killing it. The Polaris stuff is really cool. The Gem stuff is really cool, but their prices are, they something like this is like $20,000. And as we said with the Arcimoto, the difference between $12,000 and $20,000 is a big deal. And at this is $13,000. This is going to be available to a lot more people. And this is probably a lot better than the Alibaba stuff that we love on Saturday mornings. But I feel like this is going to be a product that actually hits home a lot more. And maybe if we're lucky, Polaris and Gem and John Deere and everybody else see this and say, oh, we could probably get it to $12,000 if we made a whole lot more of them. Maybe we should do something like that. So I think this is good in a lot of ways, and anything that like I'm excited to like try, I think can be quite popular, and this is definitely one of those things.
Yeah, we got to get one on your property soon.
Yep. All right, let's hit the last story if my back button works here. All right. All right, these are my favorite. I actually bought a $1,000 electric boat from China. Here's what showed up.
This has been such a fun adventure. So, you guys might be familiar with my awesomely weird Alibaba electric vehicle of the week column. Like Seth said, it's each Saturday morning I find and write up a just sort of like weird but fun electric vehicle on China's largest online shopping portal. And this is one that I found a while ago. And then over time, it was just like, I think I might actually need to get that. $1,000 boat, a five-seater. It just looked like so much fun. My parents have a 1 acre pond on their rural property. But here in Florida, there's a lot of nice little waterways that lead out to small and larger rivers. So I was like, all right, this thing could get some serious use. So I bit the bullet, sent $1,080 to China for the boat. But then, ironically, the shipping cost twice what the boat cost. So I had to pay about $2,000 to get it freighted on a container ship to Florida. Then I had to pay some guy with a truck and a trailer to pick it up at Miami Port and bring it to my parents' place. So all in, closer to $5,000 in all the costs. Only about 1,000 of which actually went towards the factory that made it. But I got to say, in the end, it's actually a fun little boat, and it's about half the cost of any other electric boat I could find in the U.S. And even the $10,000 ones I could find were like two-seaters. So for what was supposed to be a 14-foot boat, when I actually got it and measured it, it's 13 foot one. So I guess like a lot of men, we round up. So it turns into a 14-foot boat. Um, but it's surprisingly stable. I mean, it's got sort of two pontoons sort of under it. It's not a pontoon boat, but it's set up almost that way, like a channel down the middle, almost like a catamaran. So it's really stable. It's not super powerful, is the main downside. It's a 500-watt motor that it's actually pulling about 750 watts peak, but it's got a really sort of shoddy propeller on it. They just sort of made their own propeller by welding up some eighth-inch plate onto looks like a piece of pipe, and like it certainly works. Like we motor around the pond, but I don't think we're doing faster than about like 2.5 knots because it's just not very efficient. And also the weight distribution is not great. The top maybe like 20% of the propeller is actually out of the water. So if you see in the picture there, there's a lot of like foam and getting some serious cavitation from the propeller. So it's losing a ton of efficiency, and I'm going to do some work on it to see if I can get more weight in the rear, maybe push the batteries a lot further back and get the propeller down in the water. I think if I can get it all the way in the water, I might be able to get up to maybe like 3 or 4 knots. And then I'm going to try a motor swap. And basically, I have a lot of sort of customization options on it that I have planned. But for like the base foundation here, to get a actual fiberglass boat for, I mean, to buy it for 1,000, but even like to get it into your lake for 5,000, including the electric drive and everything, is kind of crazy. Oh, and then so it reminds me from this picture. I actually got several $100s worth of plywood for free from the crate that it came in. If you guys have checked plywood prices recently, I think it's like $300 worth of plywood. So take that off the $1,000 right there.
Yeah, especially if you need the plywood. All right, so we got to know, like, we got solar panels going up top. What's happening in there? What are the
Yeah,
plans?
absolutely. So I'm going to do solar on top, probably about 4 to 500 watts, depending how much I can fit. Which, because the current motor is a 500-watt motor, would probably give it close to infinite range while the sun is out. Um, it's one of many upgrades I want to do on this thing, but that seems like a gimme. Like with an electric boat with a big canopy on it already, it's a shame to just have like wasted sun hitting the top.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised it doesn't like come at least as an option because it seems like it's built for it with such
Yeah,
a flat top.
I think that they don't want to overly complicate the design here. It's about as simple as it could be for a boat. And then also I'd be worried about shipping a big solar panel like that. I mean, they did a really good job packaging it, I have to say. Like the cage that it was shipped in, I think is welded nicer than the frame on my Alibaba truck. So like they did a really good job packaging this thing. But still, I don't know about shipping like a 500-watt solar panel this way. I'd be worried about it.
That's a good point. Yeah, and you could probably just go on the open market and find something, pretty comparable.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so in terms of motor and propeller, are you looking into like, first party stuff, Minn Kota? We've seen you posted about other electric motor outfits out there, or are you going to stick with this drivetrain?
So I'm really conflicted here. Part of me wants to optimize the drivetrain as well as I can to see like, you know, how good of a boat I can turn it into with what it came with. And I might start that way just to see, what I can get out of it. But eventually, I would like to replace the motor. Then I have to decide whether I want to keep it an inboard, which it is now, with what looks like sort of a washing machine motor under the rear seats there,
Hmm.
or if I want to get like one of those Minn Kota trolling motors and create like an outboard on the back. And so I'm not sure which way I want to go. I like that it's an inboard because like it keeps it nice and neat looking. You don't see a big
Yeah.
motor back there. But the other option that was an idea my dad had was actually to um, so replace the like get rid of the motor inside altogether, and then take like a Minn Kota trolling motor and actually put it on the rudder shaft, so it's
Oh,
under the water. And then instead of turning the rudder, I would be turning the whole motor and basically
yeah.
getting propulsion or getting steering that way, which would be kind of neat.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that idea too.
Yeah, I'm just not sure
Yeah,
how strong the rudder shaft is, like if it can support a motor pushing on it.
right.
So I have to play with it.
Yeah, so many options. Yeah, and yeah, I'm kind of shocked that nobody's really kind of running with this kind of idea of a low power, efficient electric boat with a solar canopy. Like it kind of feels like the idea whose time has come, but I guess just nobody really wants to put it all out there right now. I guess.
Yeah, and it would make so much sense, especially there are so many lakes now in communities that are electric only, or just non-gas. You can have like paddle boats, canoes, or electric boats because they don't want to have oil leaking into the lake and that sort of thing. And so in those areas, these would be great. And like you said, with a solar panel, I mean, you could easily have 3,000 watt hours of battery in here. That's what it calls for. It calls for let's see, 24 volt, 100 so 100, yeah, 100 amp hours. So it's like 2.5 kilowatt hours of battery. So if you had 500 watts of solar panels and 5 or 6 hours of sun, you could completely charge it. So you'd basically never need to plug this boat in if you kept it in a lake and you had solar on it. You could just every day recharge the battery from the sun.
Yeah, it seems like almost too good to be true. I'm a little bit shocked that you have to build these things at this point, or import them from China. Uh, Kind of a shame almost.
Yeah, I hope that someone like picks this up and says, all right, we need to find like a simple, like plastic, maybe boat hull, solar panels, trolling motor, slap it together, and you've got like an American made electric boat for fairly cheap. You don't need a big motor on these things if they're designed for a lake. I'm definitely not putting this in the river yet. It's just not powerful enough. But as a lake
Right.
boat like this, it's perfectly fine. I mean, it's like a little leisure craft.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, maybe Minn Kota or one of the other companies that already do half of this stuff can get around to doing the other half, or team up with another company to do the other half.
Hopefully.
Cool. That is all the stories today. Let me have a look. I know Carl in San Diego is quite verbose in the comments. Let's see if anything here. Uh, Carl says, stoked to see Trek's Long John Backviet's cargo bike. Not sure they're selling it in the USA yet, though. And um, I didn't know that name, but Bafang programming has always used a progressively higher percentage of the current for progressively higher assist levels by default, and then you can tune it. Surprised you said this seems unique. I think is Lectric using Bafang motors?
I'm not sure, but I've been on so many Bafangs that seem to rocket you up to like a set speed limit. So I'm surprised to see that. Maybe it's an option that some OEMs choose to use the Bafang's sort of like watt based pedal assist, and some prefer speed based. But I've definitely been on Bafangs that don't feel as comfortable to pedal at slower speeds, that really give you that like big push right at the beginning. So I'll have to look into that more. Maybe it's an option that OEMs can choose.
All right, moving on. Massage Pis. Wow, need to deploy some vowels over there. Anyone knows whatever happened to Arcimoto's Mean Lean machine? They were to show the production version by the end of 2022, and then nothing happened. Should we say RIP to MLM?
I'm not sure that it's dead yet. I think they had more pressing concerns on saving the company, but
Yep.
I know they brought a fairly complete prototype to Micromobility America last September. So, they've made progress on it. I just think that the project has stalled a bit. So I wouldn't say that it's dead. I would say it was on a break, so to say.
All right. Trek's website says the Fetch 4 Plus is 75 kilos, which would be 165 pounds. That can't be right. That seems like a lot. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of bike there.
Yeah, I mean that does seem like a lot, but I mean, depending what that like cargo tub is made out of, that could be 20, 30 pounds right there.
Yeah, maybe they're using just like an old bathtub or something. Urban, by comparison, the Urban Arrow is 112 pounds, and the Reese and Mueller load starts at 82 pounds without the box. Obviously, the box is quite heavy. We'll check into that. I have a feeling that that weight is not a misprint. It sounds like perhaps they've just got a lot more bike in that particular model for heavy hauling.
Maybe they left
And
one of the kids in the front box when they weighed it.
yeah, you leave a kid in there, and all of a sudden you're at 150 pounds. All right, that's all the comments. You want to read us out?
Sure thing. So thank you everyone for tuning in with us, and we'll be back in another 2 weeks for another episode of the Wheelie Podcast. We'll see you next time, everyone.